The snow came down in thick, merciless sheets, swallowing the road until it became nothing more than a pale ribbon vanishing into white silence. It was the kind of storm that erased confidence, that made even seasoned drivers grip the wheel a little tighter and pray their headlights would find something solid ahead. Somewhere between the frozen hedges and the endless dark, a battered blue sedan shuddered once, coughed, and finally gave up. Inside the car, Emma Harper pressed her forehead against the steering wheel and closed her eyes for a heartbeat too long. The heater had died 10 minutes ago. Her breath fogged the air, each exhale a small cloud of fear. In the back seat, wrapped in mismatched coats and a single woolen blanket, her twins whimpered, soft at first, then louder, the sound cutting straight through her chest. "It's all right, my loves," she whispered, though her voice trembled. "Mummy's here." She had said those words 1,000 times before, when the rent was late, when the fridge was empty, when the nights felt too long for one woman to face alone. Tonight, they felt thinner, almost fragile. She checked her phone again. No signal. The battery blinked red, a cruel little warning. Emma stepped out into the storm, the cold biting her face like needles. The wind howled across the open fields, lifting snow into spirals that stung her eyes. She lifted the bonnet, stared at the frozen mess of metal as if sheer will might coax it back to life. It didn't. Her hands shook, not just from the cold but from the creeping thought she tried desperately to push away. The twins began to cry in earnest now, Oliver's sharp, frightened sobs mixing with Lily's softer, shuddering ones. Emma climbed back in, wrapping her arms around them from the front seat, pulling their little bodies close. Their cheeks were cold. Too cold. "Please," she murmured, though she didn't know who she was pleading with. "Please, someone." Miles away, a black SUV cut through the storm like a blade. Inside, the world was warm, quiet, insulated from the chaos outside. Daniel Ashcroft sat alone in the back, his gaze unfocused as snow streaked past the tinted windows. Billionaire. Visionary. Headlines used words like those as if they told the whole story. They never mentioned the long nights, the meetings that blurred together, the strange emptiness that followed every victory. His driver slowed suddenly. "There's a car up ahead, sir," the man said. "Hazard lights are on." Daniel leaned forward, peering through the glass. He almost told him to keep going. Almost. He had a flight to catch, a schedule that didn't bend for winter storms or strangers on the roadside. Then he saw it, a woman standing in the snow, waving both arms, desperation written into every frantic movement. "Stop the car," Daniel said. The SUV pulled over. The moment Daniel stepped outside, the cold shocked him, stealing his breath. He took a few steps toward the stranded sedan, snow crunching under his polished shoes. The woman turned, relief and fear colliding on her face. "Please," she said, her voice hoarse. "My children." He didn't wait for the rest. He glanced into the back seat and saw them. Two small faces streaked with tears, eyes wide and terrified. The sound of their crying hit him harder than the wind ever could. Something old and unexpected stirred in his chest, a memory of being small and afraid and unseen. "We'll get you out of here," he said, already shrugging off his coat. "All of you." Emma stared at him, disbelief freezing her in place for a second. He was calm, composed, impossibly out of place in the storm, yet his eyes were kind, focused entirely on her children as he draped his coat around them. Daniel's driver radioed for assistance, but the storm made promises uncertain. Time mattered. Daniel made a decision without analyzing it, without weighing cost or convenience. "They'll be warmer in my car," he said. "Come on." Inside the SUV, the twins' crying slowly softened, their bodies relaxing as warmth seeped back into their fingers. Emma sat between them, rubbing their hands, tears slipping down her cheeks now that she no longer had to be strong alone. "Thank you," she whispered, over and over, as if the words might somehow repay him. Daniel watched her quietly. He noticed the way she kept touching the twins, grounding herself through them, the exhaustion etched into her face beneath a fierce, stubborn love. This wasn't pity he felt, it was something deeper, heavier. They drove through the storm together, the road treacherous, the night endless. At a small roadside and finally glowing through the snow like a promise, Daniel insisted they stop. Rooms were scarce, power flickering, but shelter was shelter. Later, with the twins asleep at last, curled together beneath thick quilts, Emma sat at the edge of the bed, hands clasped tight in her lap. Daniel stood by the window, watching the storm rage on as if trying to tear the world apart. "I don't even know your name,"
she said softly. Daniel, he replied. And yours? Emma.
The way she said it, quiet, careful, stayed with him. He turned, meeting her eyes, and in that moment something unspoken passed between them, a fragile thread woven from gratitude, curiosity, and the strange sense that this night was not an accident. Outside, the wind screamed louder, rattling the glass, as if warning them both that what had just begun would not be simple, that the snowbound road had only just brought their lives together, and that when morning came, nothing would be quite the same, because Daniel was already reaching into his pocket, pulling out his phone, and saying, "There's something you should know about me before we go any further." Emma looked at him, her body still angled protectively toward the twins, as if even now the world might try to take something from her.
All right, she said quietly. What is it?
Daniel hesitated for the first time that night. He was used to boardrooms, to numbers that bent to his will, to people who already knew his name before he entered the room. Here, under flickering yellow light that hummed with unreliable electricity, he felt strangely exposed. "My last name is Ashcroft," he said. "Daniel Ashcroft." The name landed softly at first, like snow. Emma frowned, searching her memory, then her eyes widened slightly. Not awe, more confusion than anything else.
"As in Ashcroft Holdings?" she asked. He nodded once. "Yes."
She absorbed that in silence, glancing at the sleeping twins as if expecting the revelation to change the air around them. When she looked back at him, there was no excitement, no sudden calculation.
Only tired honesty. "That doesn't really mean much to me," she said.
"Right now, you're just the man who stopped."
Something inside Daniel shifted.
He'd spent years trying to convince himself that people saw him, not the empire behind his name. Hearing it spoken so simply, so sincerely, unsettled him more than praise ever had. The inn creaked as the wind pressed against its walls. Somewhere down the corridor, a door slammed. Daniel loosened his tie, suddenly aware of how stiff, how out of place he felt. "You were heading somewhere important?"
Emma asked after a moment. "Yes," he replied. "But not more important than this."
She studied him, as if weighing the truth of his words, then nodded slowly. "We were trying to get to my sister's place."
"Just for the weekend?"
"The twins haven't seen her in months." Her voice cracked slightly. "The car's been unreliable." Daniel glanced toward the window, where the snow showed no sign of mercy. "You shouldn't be on the road in weather like this." "I know," she said, a faint, humorless smile touching her lips. "But sometimes you don't have the luxury of waiting for perfect conditions." Those words lingered. Daniel recognized them. He'd built his entire life on imperfect conditions, on risk disguised as confidence. Yet he'd never done it with two small lives depending on him. "Tomorrow," he said, carefully, "I can arrange for your car to be taken care of.
Properly.
And transport, wherever you need to go."
Emma stiffened.
"I can't afford." "I'm not offering a loan," he interrupted gently. "And I'm not asking for anything in return." She looked away, blinking rapidly. Pride warred with exhaustion on her face, a battle Daniel suspected she fought daily. "I don't like feeling indebted," she said. "I understand," he replied. "Then think of it as me repaying something."
"For what?" she asked.
"For reminding me that some things still matter." Her eyes returned to him then, searching, curious despite herself. Before she could ask what he meant, Lily stirred, letting out a small whimper. Emma was instantly on her feet, smoothing the child's hair, whispering soft reassurances until the little girl relaxed again. Daniel watched, struck by the tenderness of the scene. He had attended galas where millions were pledged in a single evening, yet this quiet, unwavering devotion, felt heavier, more real. "You're a good mother," he said. Emma froze for half a second, then shrugged, though her eyes shone. "I try."
"No," he said firmly.
"You are." Silence settled between them, not awkward, just full. Outside, the storm raged on, sealing them off from the rest of the world, as if this small room existed in its own fragile pocket of time. Hours later, when exhaustion finally pulled at her eyelids, Emma lay down between the twins, one hand resting on each small back. Daniel took the chair near the window, though he doubted he'd sleep. He found himself listening to the rhythm of their breathing, steady now, alive. At some point in the night, his phone buzzed softly. A message from his assistant about flights, meetings, rescheduling. Daniel turned the screen face down without replying. Morning crept in slowly, gray and uncertain. The storm had eased but left behind a world transformed, roads buried, trees bowed, silence thick. Emma woke to the smell of weak coffee and the sound of quiet movement. Daniel stood near the door, speaking in low tones to the innkeeper, his presence commanding without being loud. He turned when he sensed her watching. "Good morning," he said.
"They are safe to sleep a bit longer."
She nodded, sitting up carefully. "You didn't have to stay."
"I wanted to," he replied simply.
After breakfast, toast split 4 ways, shared without ceremony. Daniel made calls. Things happened quickly after that.
A recovery truck on standby.
A driver ready once roads cleared. Names exchanged, promises made. Emma felt overwhelmed by it all, by the efficiency, the ease with which he moved obstacles aside.
It made her acutely aware of how heavy life usually felt.
"Daniel," she said quietly, stopping him as he slipped his phone back into his pocket. "Why are you really doing this?" He met her gaze, something unguarded flickering there. "Because I saw your children crying in the snow," he said. "And because once you see that, you can't unsee it."
A knock sounded at the door, news that the road ahead had been partially cleared. Time began moving again, reluctantly.
As they prepared to leave, Oliver tugged on Daniel's coat sleeve, his small fingers curling into the fabric.
"You stopped," he said solemnly. Daniel crouched to his level.
"Yes. Thank you," the boy added, then leaned against him without hesitation. Daniel felt his throat tighten as he gently returned the embrace. Emma watched, heart pounding, sensing that this moment, this unlikely crossing of lives, was only the beginning of something far larger, something neither of them yet understood. As they stepped back into the cold, unaware of how deeply that snowy night had already altered the path ahead. The cold greeted them again as they stepped outside, sharper now that the storm had loosened its grip but not fully released the land. Snow lay piled like forgotten secrets along the roadside, the sky a dull sheet of pewter. Daniel's driver opened the SUV door, and Emma hesitated for just a moment before guiding the twins inside. Oliver climbed in first, Lily following, clutching her stuffed rabbit with one mittened hand. The recovery truck arrived sooner than Emma expected. She watched as her small blue car was winched from its icy grave, relief and sadness twisting together in her chest. That car had carried her through everything: job interviews, hospital visits, midnight drives when sleep wouldn't come. Seeing it dangling helplessly made her feel exposed. "It'll be taken to a proper garage," Daniel said, standing beside her. "No shortcuts." "Thank you," she replied again, though the words felt insufficient, worn thin by repetition.
The drive was quiet at first.
The twins watched the snowy landscape slide past, their earlier fear replaced with sleepy curiosity. Emma stared out the window, her thoughts heavy. She wasn't used to silence that didn't feel lonely. Daniel broke it gently. "What do you do, Emma?" he asked.
"For work."
She smiled faintly. "A bit of everything."
"I clean offices at night."
"I help at a bakery in the mornings when they need extra hands." "I used to be a teaching assistant, before," her voice trailed off. "Before the twins?"
Daniel prompted.
"Before their father left," she said simply, without bitterness, just fact. Life rearranged itself.
Daniel nodded, understanding more than he expected.
"You make it work."
"I have to," she replied. "They didn't ask to be here." They reached the outskirts of a small town as daylight strengthened.
Daniel instructed the driver to pull over near a cafe that looked miraculously open, steam fogging its windows like a promise of warmth. Inside, the smell of coffee and fresh bread wrapped around them. As the twins settled at a corner table with hot chocolate, Emma and Daniel stood near the counter. She felt acutely aware of their reflection in the glass, her worn coat beside his tailored one, 2 worlds brushing shoulders. "You don't belong in places like this," she said quietly, not unkindly.
He smiled. "I grew up in places like this. I just learned how to leave."
She glanced at him, surprised.
"People don't usually talk about that." "People usually don't ask," he replied. "They Saturday."
The twins chatted softly, color returning to their cheeks. Emma watched them, her heart easing for the first time since the night before. When she looked back at Daniel, she found him watching them too, something thoughtful shadowing his expression.
"You have a family?" she asked.
"No," he said. "I have companies. Buildings with my name on them.
But no one waiting for me anywhere."
The honesty of it caught her off guard. That sounds lonely.
It is, he admitted. But it's quiet.
You convince yourself that's enough.
She considered that.
Quiet can be nice, she said. Until it isn't. Their eyes met, and again that strange, fragile thread tightened between them. After the cafe, the driver received word that the main road toward Emma's sister's town was open. Daniel offered to have them taken the rest of the way. Emma hesitated, pride rising like a reflex, then glanced at the twins and nodded. The journey continued, the landscape softening from harsh white to gentle gray. Emma found herself talking more about Lily's love of drawing, Oliver's endless questions, the way both of them insisted on sleeping with the light on. Daniel listened, truly listened, as if committing every detail to memory. When they finally reached her sister's street, Emma's chest tightened. Familiar houses, smoke curling from chimneys, life continuing as if the storm had never tried to swallow her whole.
The SUV stopped.
For a moment, no one moved.
This is us, Emma said. Daniel nodded.
He stepped out, helped the twins down.
Lily hugged his leg without warning.
Oliver followed, more reserved but just as sincere. Will we see you again? Lily asked, looking up at him.
Emma's breath caught. She hadn't expected that question. Daniel knelt, meeting the child's eyes. I don't know, he said honestly.
But I hope so.
Emma swallowed.
I don't know how to thank you.
Then don't, he replied.
Just let this be something good that happened. She reached into her pocket, pulling out a scrap of paper, scribbling her number with a pen borrowed from her sister who had just stepped outside, eyes wide at the scene unfolding. Emma handed it to him, her hand brushing his. In case, she said. Daniel took it carefully, as if it was something fragile. In case. They parted then, but not cleanly. As the SUV pulled away, Daniel looked back through the window. Emma stood with her arm around the twins, snow crunching beneath her boots, watching until the car disappeared from sight. Inside the warm house, surrounded by questions and relief, Emma felt something unfamiliar stir, a cautious hope she didn't fully trust yet. Miles away, Daniel stared at the number on the paper, the city drawing closer with every mile. His phone buzzed again, the world demanding his attention, but his thoughts stayed with a woman on a snowy road and two children who had clung to him without knowing his name. Later that night, in a high-rise apartment lit by the glow of distant traffic, Daniel poured himself a drink and set it down untouched. He dialed the number before he could overthink it, before the old habits crept back in.
The phone rang.
Once.
Twice.
Emma answered, her voice soft with surprise.
Hello. Emma, he said. It's Daniel.
I just wanted to check that you arrived safely.
We did, she replied.
They're asleep already. Like nothing happened.
He smiled faintly.
Sometimes that's how the most important things look afterward. There was a pause, full of things neither of them said. Snow began to fall again outside his window, lighter this time, almost gentle, as if the storm itself were giving them space, unaware that somewhere between silence and distance, a connection was quietly deepening, waiting to be tested by choices neither of them had yet made. Emma leaned against the kitchen counter, phone pressed to her ear, watching the soft rise and fall of the twins' chests from the doorway. Her sister's house was warm, smelling faintly of lavender and toast, yet part of her still felt as though she was standing on that frozen road, the wind howling, waiting for something to break.
I'm glad, she said into the phone.
Really? Daniel could hear the quiet in the background, the kind of quiet that came from safety rather than emptiness. It soothed him in a way he hadn't expected.
I won't keep you, he said.
I know you've had a long night.
She hesitated.
It was strange, she admitted. Everything felt like it was falling apart. And then suddenly it wasn't. Life does that, he replied. It waits until you're convinced you can't take any more. She let out a small, tired laugh. You sound like someone who's learned that the hard way. More than once. They spoke for a few minutes longer, nothing urgent, nothing dramatic. When the call ended, Emma remained where she was, phone still in hand, as if putting it down might make the night feel less real. The days that followed settled into a tentative rhythm. The storm cleared fully, leaving the world washed and bright. Daniel arranged for Emma's car to be repaired and returned, refusing every attempt she made to pay. He sent a message once it was ready, nothing more than a simple update, but Emma read it twice, then a third time, before replying with a careful thank you. They didn't speak every day. When they did, it was brief at first, messages about the twins, about the weather, about small things that felt safe to share. Yet even in those exchanges, something steady was building, like a bridge laid plank by plank. One evening, as Emma sat at the kitchen table helping Lily color while Oliver lined up toy cars, her phone buzzed.
Daniel, are you free to talk?
She stared at the screen for a moment, then typed back.
Emma, I am. Just give me a second.
She put the phone on speaker, keeping her voice low.
Hi.
I was wondering, Daniel said, sounding uncharacteristically unsure, if you'd consider having dinner with me.
Just dinner.
No pressure. Her heart skipped, then steadied. She glanced at the twins, their heads bent together in serious concentration. I don't have a lot of babysitting options, she said carefully.
I thought you might say that, he replied.
So I was wondering if I could take you all.
Somewhere simple.
Child-friendly.
Emma smiled despite herself.
You don't give up easily, do you?
I've built an empire on not giving up, he said lightly.
Then, more softly, but this isn't about that.
She considered it.
Caution whispered in her ear, reminding her of past disappointments, of promises that had sounded sincere once. But another voice, quieter, braver, reminded her of a man standing in the snow, coat off his back, kneeling to a crying child.
All right, she said.
Dinner. The restaurant Daniel chose was warm and unpretentious, tucked between a bookshop and a florist. The twins were instantly charmed by the menu, by the crayons provided without being asked. Daniel relaxed visibly as he watched Emma navigate the small chaos with ease, offering to help, listening when Oliver explained the complex rules of his imaginary game. You're good with them, Emma observed as he patiently listened.
I'm learning, he said.
From you. As the evening unfolded, conversation deepened naturally. Emma spoke about her fears, about the constant balancing act, the exhaustion that never quite lifted. Daniel spoke about pressure, about expectations that came with his name, about the loneliness that success didn't cure. When the twins grew sleepy, Daniel drove them home. At the door, Emma paused, unsure of the line she didn't want to cross too quickly. Thank you, she said again, but this time it was different.
Less desperate. More hopeful. He nodded.
I'd like to see you again.
I'd like that too, she admitted. Weeks passed. Winter softened into early spring.
Daniel became a familiar presence, not overwhelming, never intrusive.
He showed up when he said he would. He listened.
He learned the twins' routines, their fears, their favorite bedtime stories. Emma noticed the way he watched them, how carefully he moved around their lives, as if aware of how easily trust could be broken. It made her trust him more, even as it scared her. One afternoon, Daniel invited her to his apartment. Emma hesitated, then agreed, curiosity mingling with nerves. The place was beautiful, but impersonal, clean lines, muted colors, too quiet. It doesn't feel lived in, she said honestly.
I know, he replied. I don't live much. I just exist here.
She wandered to the window, city sprawling beneath her.
You could change that. He looked at her then, really looked at her.
Would you help me? The question hung between them, heavier than it sounded. Emma felt the weight of it, the promise and the risk intertwined.
Before she could answer, her phone rang.
Her sister's name flashed on the screen. Emma frowned, a familiar knot tightening in her stomach. Everything all right?
Daniel asked.
I don't know, she said, already answering.
Her sister's voice was tight with worry.
Emma, don't panic, but Oliver's school called. There was an incident.
Emma's heart dropped.
What kind of incident? They are not saying much over the phone. Just that you need to come in immediately. Emma grabbed her coat, fear rushing in fast and cold, memories of that snowy night crashing back. Daniel was already reaching for his keys, his voice steady, grounded.
I'm coming with you, he said. She looked at him, eyes wide.
You don't have to.
I know, he replied.
But I want to. As they hurried toward the door, the city blurring around them, neither of them noticed how naturally they moved together now, how instinctively they leaned into each other in moments of fear, unaware that this next turn would test everything they'd begun to build, and reveal truths that could either bind them closer or tear open wounds they hadn't yet named. The drive to the school felt endless, every red light a personal betrayal. Emma's hands trembled in her lap while Daniel drove with controlled urgency, his jaw tight, eyes fixed on the road.
Neither of them spoke. Fear didn't need words.
When they arrived, The sight of an ambulance parked outside shattered what little calm Emma had managed to hold on to.
She bolted from the car before Daniel could even turn off the engine.
Inside, the corridors buzzed with anxious energy, voices overlapping, shoes squeaking against polished floors. "Emma Harper," a teacher called out. "Yes, yes, that's me. Where's my son?" Her voice cracked despite her effort to stay composed.
The teacher led them to a small office.
Oliver sat on a chair, pale but alert, an ice pack pressed to his forehead. The moment he saw Emma, he burst into tears. "Mummy!" She rushed to him, dropping to her knees, pulling him into her arms as if she could shield him from the entire world. "I'm here," she whispered over and over. "I've got you."
"It was an accident," the teacher explained gently. "He slipped during recess."
"He'll be fine, but we wanted you here." Emma nodded, barely hearing her heart slowly restarting as she felt Oliver's small arms tighten around her neck. Only when his crying softened did she notice Daniel standing quietly in the corner, giving them space, his presence steady as a wall behind her. Later, after the paperwork and reassurances, after Oliver was declared shaken but safe, they stepped back outside. Emma leaned against the brick wall, exhaustion crashing over her in a wave so strong her knees nearly buckled. Daniel caught her without hesitation.
She didn't pull away this time.
"I thought I was going to lose him," she whispered, her face buried against his coat. "You didn't," Daniel said softly.
"And you won't."
"You're not alone anymore." The words settled deep inside her, finding a place that had been empty for far too long. She pulled back slightly, looking up at him, really looking, at the concern etched into his face, at the way his hand still rested protectively at her back. That night, after the twins were asleep and the house quiet once more, Emma sat across from Daniel at the small kitchen table. The weight of the day lingered between them, heavy but clarifying.
"You show up," she said finally.
"That's what scares me." He didn't flinch.
"Why?"
"Because if I let myself believe in that," she said, voice barely above a whisper, "and you ever stop, I don't know if I could recover." Daniel reached across the table, not touching her yet. "Emma, I've had everything people think they want.
Money, power, control. None of it taught me how to stay."
"You did. Your children did." She searched his eyes, looking for cracks, for promises too shiny to be true. What she found instead was vulnerability, raw, unpolished.
"I don't need saving," she said.
"I know," he replied. "That's why I want you.
Not to rescue you.
To walk with you." Silence wrapped around them, not empty, but full of possibility. Emma let out a slow breath, something loosening in her chest. Spring turned into summer. The story they were writing together didn't arrive in grand gestures, but in ordinary moments. Daniel sitting cross-legged on the floor assembling puzzles, Emma laughing more freely than she had in years, the twins racing toward him when he arrived, calling his name without hesitation.
The media noticed eventually. A billionaire seen repeatedly with a struggling single mother. Speculation bloomed like weeds. Daniel didn't hide.
When asked, he answered simply, "They are my family." The word sent ripples through the world, and through Emma's heart. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in gold, Daniel took Emma and the twins back to the road where everything had begun. The snow was gone now, replaced by wildflowers pushing bravely through the grass.
"This is where I saw you," he said quietly.
And everything changed.
Oliver frowned thoughtfully.
"You stopped," he said, as if explaining a great truth. "Yes," Daniel replied.
"I did."
He turned to Emma then, pulling a small box from his pocket, not flashy, not dramatic.
"Just real."
"I can't promise you a life without storms," he said. "But I can promise you this, I will stop.
Every time. For you. For them."
Tears blurred her vision as she nodded, unable to speak.
She said yes without hesitation.
The twins cheered, unaware of the full meaning, only knowing that happiness had settled around them like something permanent. Years later, Emma would sometimes think back to that night, the broken car, the snow, the sound of her children crying into the dark. She would realize that what saved them wasn't wealth or luck, but a moment of humanity, a choice made by a stranger who refused to look away. And Daniel would often say that he didn't rescue a struggling mother in the snow. "She rescued me," he'd say. "She reminded me what it means to stop, and to stay." As the family stood together under the open sky, laughter echoing softly, the road stretched ahead. Not perfect, not easy, but shared, warm with love, and finally, undeniably, home.